In a small, crowded neighborhood in Lagos, there lived a young girl named Ada. At just 7 years old, her world should have been full of innocence, laughter, and dreams of a bright future. But instead, her life was wrapped in an unbearable secret, one that not even her mother knew about. Every night, Ada would cry herself to sleep, clutching her pillows so tightly that her little fingers would turn white. What she knew, what she had experienced, was something no child should have to face, and her mother, busy with her job at the market, had no idea that the father she trusted with their little girl was hiding a monstrous truth. What happened next would change their lives forever, shattering the bond of trust between a mother and her daughter, and exposing the dark side of a man who was supposed to protect them both. Amaka worked tirelessly every day in the bustling streets of Lagos to provide for Ada and her husband Eze. The family lived in a cramped, one-room apartment in a neighborhood where the sounds of life echoed through narrow alleys. Amaka did what she could to make ends meet, selling food at the local market, taking up side jobs, all while ensuring that Ada went to school and had everything she needed. But despite their struggles, Amaka had one great hope, that her daughter would grow up to have a better life, away from the hardships she had known. She had big dreams for Ada, a future full of education, happiness, and freedom. Unfortunately, the one thing Amaka couldn't protect her from was the darkness lurking at home. For weeks, Ada had become quieter than usual. She no longer ran around the house playing games or singing songs like she used to. She would sit in corners, staring at the floor, her eyes distant and sad. Amaka noticed the change, but as a mother struggling to keep the family afloat, she didn't have the time to ask too many questions. She simply assumed that Ada was growing up and that perhaps she was just tired or overwhelmed by school. But there were signs that told a different story, hidden in the small, subtle details that Amaka couldn't see. Ada had begun to flinch every time Eze came near her. She would hide behind furniture when her father was around, and the moment he touched her shoulder or even looked at her too long, Ada would shudder. One evening, after a long day of work, Amaka returned home to find her daughter unusually quiet. Ada was sitting on the floor, staring out of the window, her tiny hands folded in her lap. Amaka knelt down beside her. "Ada, what's wrong? You've been so quiet lately," she asked gently. Ada didn't answer right away. She simply shook her head, as if the words were stuck in her throat. "Are you feeling sick?" Amaka asked, brushing Ada's hair away from her face. Ada looked up at her mother with wide eyes, as if she wanted to speak, but was too scared to. In that moment, Amaka felt a strange unease. There was something wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The breaking point came one fateful evening when Amaka was out at the market, as usual. Ada was left alone with her father, who had grown increasingly distant and strange in his behavior. This time, the situation escalated in a way that no one could have predicted. Ada had been sitting quietly in the corner, playing with a doll, when she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Eze. "Come, Ada," he said softly, but there was something in his voice that made Ada's blood run cold. "Come and sit by me." But Ada knew. She knew that something wasn't right. She stood up quickly, her little heart pounding in her chest. "No, Papa," she whispered, backing away. Before she could get to the door, Eze grabbed her, pulling her into his arms. Ada screamed, loud, piercing screams that echoed through the empty apartment. Luckily, their neighbor Mama Nkechi was returning from the market just as the screams filled the air. She had heard the cries many times before, but this time they sounded different, desperate, terrified. Without thinking, Mama Nkechi rushed to the door, banging on it. "Eze, what are you doing to that child?" The force of her voice startled Eze. He froze, his grip loosening on Ada. In that split second, Ada broke free and ran to Mama Nkechi. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Please help her," Eze stammered, realizing that his darkest secret had been exposed. Amaka arrived home to find Ada sobbing uncontrollably in Mama Nkechi's arms. The neighbor explained everything. "Amaka, your husband is not the man you think he is. He was trying to harm Ada, your own daughter," Mama Nkechi said, her voice full of anguish. Amaka's world shattered in an instant. The man she had trusted, the man she had called her husband, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. Without saying another word, Amaka turned to Eze, fury and disbelief in her eyes. "How could you? How could you do this to our daughter?" she cried. Eze, now broken and defeated, had no excuse. He had been caught. The lie he had built for so many years crumbled in that moment. Amaka stood frozen, her eyes locked on her husband Eze, who now seemed like a stranger. The warmth and affection that had once defined their relationship had evaporated, replaced by a chilling sense of betrayal. Ada clung tightly to Mama Nkechi, her tiny body shaking as she continued to sob. "Amaka, please," Eze pleaded, his voice breaking. "I was weak. I don't know what came over me." But Amaka's heart was hardened. The man she had loved, the father of her child, had betrayed their trust in the most unspeakable way. How could she ever look at him the same way again? How could she ever forgive him for what he had done to their daughter? Without saying a word, Amaka turned to Mama Nkechi. "Please take Ada. I need to speak with him alone," she said quietly. Mama Nkechi nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. She gently led Ada away, taking her to the next room. The door closed softly behind them, leaving Amaka and Eze alone in the stillness of the apartment. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amaka felt her heart pounding in her chest. The betrayal was too much to process, too much to bear. She had never imagined that something like this could happen, not in her wildest nightmares. How had it come to this? Finally, Amaka broke the silence, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "How long, Eze? How long has this been going on?" Eze lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know. It started a while ago. It was a moment of weakness. I never wanted to hurt her, Amaka. I swear." Amaka's breath caught in her throat. "You never wanted to hurt her? Then why did you do it? How could you?" "I was foolish, Amaka," Eze whispered. "I thought it was just a mistake, but I see now how wrong I was. I never meant for any of this to happen." Amaka shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You hurt her. You hurt my baby. How could you do this? How could you betray our daughter like that?" Eze stood up, taking a hesitant step toward her. "Amaka, please. I love you. I love Ada. I never meant to do anything that would hurt her, but I can't change what I've done. All I can do is beg for your forgiveness." But Amaka couldn't find it in her heart to forgive him. The hurt, the pain, the shame, too much had happened for her to just forget. She couldn't look at him the same way again. "I can't forgive you, Eze," Amaka whispered, her voice breaking. "Not this time." The next few days were a blur of emotions. Eze left their home, knowing that his actions had destroyed his family. He was nothing more than a shadow of the man he used to be, a broken soul who had lost everything he once held dear. Amaka focused all her energy on Ada, who had become more withdrawn since the incident. The trauma of what had happened weighed heavily on the little girl's heart, and Amaka knew it would take time, perhaps a lifetime, for her daughter to heal. Every time Amaka looked at Ada, her heart ached. Ada's innocence had been stolen from her in the cruelest way possible. She should have been playing with her friends, laughing in the streets, not hiding in fear from the man who was supposed to protect her. Amaka tried to reassure Ada, telling her that she was safe now, that no one would ever hurt her again. But the little girl was distant, her eyes haunted by memories she was too young to fully understand. Amaka knew she needed help, professional help, therapy, anything to help Ada cope with the darkness that had invaded her young life. But the fear of the unknown held her back. How could she explain this to someone else? How could she even begin to share what had happened in their home? Days turned into weeks, and the family's life seemed to spiral into chaos. The quiet whispers of the neighbors about Eze's betrayal only made things worse. In a small community like theirs, rumors spread quickly, and soon everyone knew what had happened. Some people condemned Eze, while others simply shook their heads in pity, unsure of what to say or do. Amaka kept to herself, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. She didn't want to relive the pain. She didn't want to answer questions about her marriage, about Edza, about what had happened to Ada. The weight of their shame was too heavy to bear, and Amaka withdrew from everyone, isolating herself and her daughter from the world. But as the days passed, something shifted within her. Amaka realized that she couldn't keep hiding forever. She couldn't protect Ada by pretending everything was okay. Her daughter needed more than just silence and avoidance. She needed healing, and Amaka needed to be strong for her. The hardest decision came when Amaka knew she had to face the truth. The truth that Ada's healing would not come from running away or pretending that nothing had happened. It was time to confront the pain head-on, to face the memories, the trauma, and to find a way forward. One evening, as the sun began to set over Lagos, Amaka sat down with Ada. She took her daughter's small hands in hers, looking into her eyes, trying to find the right words. "Ada, baby, I want you to know that you are safe now. No one can ever hurt you again. We're going to be okay, I promise. And if you ever want to talk about anything, about what happened, I will always be here for you. Always." Ada looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a flicker of trust. "I'm scared, Mama," she whispered. "I don't want to see him again. I don't want him to hurt me anymore." Amaka held her close, hugging her tightly. "I know, baby, I know. But you don't have to be scared anymore. We will get through this together." In that moment, Amaka realized that the road ahead would be long and difficult. Ada's healing wouldn't happen overnight, and Amaka had no idea what the future held. But one thing was certain: she would never let anything or anyone hurt her daughter again. Amaka's heart was heavy as the days wore on. The thought of facing the world outside her home felt like an insurmountable challenge. She had shut herself off from everything: friends, family, even the small community of neighbors who once visited often. The house felt empty and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth it once held. She and Ada spent most of their time indoors, trying to keep their minds busy, but it was becoming harder to ignore the feeling of isolation. Amaka knew that things couldn't stay like this forever. Ada had started to open up, albeit in small ways. Some nights, when the pain of what had happened seemed unbearable, she would cry herself to sleep, but the next day, she would try to be brave, to act as though nothing was wrong. The young girl was confused, her innocence torn and her trust shattered. But Amaka could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could heal. Amaka was determined to help her, even if it meant facing her own pain head-on. After weeks of sleepless nights, Amaka finally made the difficult decision to seek professional help for Ada. She couldn't keep pretending that things would get better on their own. She needed to give Ada the tools to heal, to deal with the trauma that had been inflicted on her. The thought of speaking to a therapist made Amaka uneasy, but she pushed her fears aside for Ada's sake. It was time to stop hiding. She needed to break free from the silence that had kept them both captive. The following day, Amaka made an appointment with a child psychologist known for helping children cope with trauma. She was hesitant as she dialed the number, but her determination won out. As soon as the phone call ended, Amaka felt a small sense of relief. She was taking the first step toward healing, not just for Ada, but for herself as well. When the day of the appointment arrived, Amaka tried to reassure Ada, but the little girl's nervousness was palpable. Ada clung to her mother's hand, looking up at her with wide eyes. "What will happen, Mama?" Amaka smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. "We're just going to talk to someone who can help, sweetheart. It's going to be okay, I promise." The therapist's office was a calm, welcoming place. It was bright and cozy, with soft toys scattered around the room and a large window that let in the sunlight. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Adebayo, greeted them with a warm smile. She had a calming presence that immediately put Amaka and Ada at ease. As Dr. Adebayo sat down with Ada, Amaka could feel the weight of the past few weeks lift ever so slightly. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of hope. The sessions with Dr. Adebayo weren't easy, but they were necessary. Ada initially struggled to open up, but over time she began to trust Dr. Adebayo. The therapist used games and art therapy to help Ada express her feelings. allowing her to communicate the things she couldn't say out loud. Slowly but surely, the walls Ada had built around her heart began to crumble. Amaka too began attending therapy sessions with Dr. Adebayo. As she listened to the therapist's advice, Amaka started to understand the importance of creating a safe space for Ada. She needed to be the rock her daughter could lean on, and that meant being strong, even when her own heart was breaking. Days turned into weeks, and little by little Ada began to smile again. Her laughter, though faint at first, started to fill the empty spaces of their home. Amaka held on to that sound like a lifeline. It was a reminder that they were making progress, that there was still hope for healing. Just when things seemed to be getting better, a knock on the door shattered the fragile peace that had settled in the house. Amaka opened the door to find a figure she never expected to see. Eze. He stood there, looking worn and broken, his eyes full of regret. "Mama, who is that?" Ada asked, her voice trembling from the safety of the doorway. Amaka's heart raced as she stared at Eze. His presence filled the room with a thick, suffocating tension. She hadn't seen him since the day he left, and the sight of him brought back a flood of painful memories. "Please, Amaka," Eze's voice cracked. "I know I've lost everything. I've destroyed our family. But I'm begging you, please let me see Ada. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to make things right. I want to be there for her. Please, just give me a chance." Amaka's heart twisted with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, to never speak to him again. But another part of her felt sorry for the man who was once her husband, the man who had made a terrible mistake and now wanted to make amends. Ada, still hiding behind her mother, clutched her hand tightly. The sight of her father, the man who had hurt her so deeply, was too much for the young girl to bear. I can't face him, Mama," Ada whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm scared." Amaka knelt down beside her daughter, gently wiping away her tears. "You don't have to, Ada. You don't have to face him until you're ready." Eze took a step back, realizing that it was too soon, too painful for Ada. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice filled with sorrow. "I'll go. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And I'll keep waiting, no matter how long it takes." As he turned to leave, Amaka stood in the doorway, watching him go. She felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and pity. Eze had destroyed everything they had built, but in his eyes, Amaka could see the remnants of the man he once was. The man she had loved. But Amaka also knew that forgiveness wasn't something she could give so easily. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, as Amaka lay beside Ada, she couldn't help but think about the long road ahead. The healing wasn't over. It would take time, years maybe. But one thing was certain, Amaka was determined to protect her daughter, to help her heal, and to rebuild their lives, no matter how difficult it might be. Ada's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mama, do you think Daddy will ever come back?" Amaka hesitated before answering. "I don't know, sweetheart, but what I do know is that you're safe now, and no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Ada smiled weakly, snuggling closer to her mother. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, Ada. Always." And as they lay there in the quiet of the night, Amaka knew that, although their lives had been forever changed, they would find a way to heal, to survive, and to move forward together. Days passed, and with each new dawn, Amaka and Ada took small steps toward healing. The pain of the past never fully disappeared, but it began to fade, buried beneath layers of love and support. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger each day as they found new ways to embrace life together. Amaka never saw Eze again after that day. Though he had asked for forgiveness, she realized that some wounds were too deep to mend, and some things could never go back to the way they were. She focused on Ada and their future, giving her the security and safety she needed to grow and heal. Ada, once a shy and fearful little girl, began to regain her spark. With the love of her mother, the support of her therapy, and the passage of time, Ada learned how to trust again, not just in others but in herself. She grew into a strong, intelligent young girl, her heart healed by the constant presence of her mother's unconditional love. As the years went by, Ada blossomed. She became an inspiration to others, a living testament to the power of resilience. Her story was not one of tragedy, but of strength, of a young girl who had faced unimaginable hurt and found the courage to rise above it. Amaka continued to work hard to provide for her daughter, and their small home became a sanctuary of peace and warmth. While the pain of the past was never truly gone, it no longer ruled their lives. Instead, they focused on the future, on the joy they could still create, on the family they had built despite everything. One day, as Amaka and Ada sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the horizon, Ada turned to her mother with a thoughtful expression. "Mama," she began, "do you ever wonder what could have been?" Amaka smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the wisdom that only time and experience could bring. "I used to, but now I realize that it doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with the life we have now. We've made it through, Ada, and that's all that matters." Ada nodded, a peaceful smile playing on her lips. "You're right, Mama. I don't need to worry about what happened. I just need to be the best I can be now." As Amaka watched her daughter, she felt a deep sense of pride. Ada was stronger than she ever thought possible. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, carrying the lessons of the past with her, but not letting them define her. The future was theirs to shape.